Evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Audrey from the Animal and Veterinary Service, a cluster of the National Parks Board, and I will be your moderator for today. The webinar will be starting soon. A gentle reminder that all participants should keep their mics muted. The main chat box will also be disabled. If you face any technical issues, please message the user named tech support. If you have questions at any point of the webinar, please post them to the user named Q&A. Thank you for your patience as we wait for our final participants to join us this evening. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Science Behind Animal Behavior webinar series, where we will be focusing on the behavior of shelter dogs. We are very pleased to welcome Trish McMillan as a speaker today. Trish is a certified dog behavior consultant and dog trainer and has a master's degree in animal behavior. Trish has worked at ASPCA for nearly 8 years as Director of Animal Behavior, then as a behaviorist in the field team, helping assess and rehabilitate dogs from cruelty cases, dog fighting, and hoarding situations before she joined the Shelter Research and Development team. As an expert who shares her knowledge and experience all over the world on animal sheltering issues, we are very excited to have her here today. I'm sure all of you in this Zoom session are very keen to ask her questions. You can do so by typing into the chat box to the user named Q&A at any time during the session. And a gentle reminder again to please mute your microphones as well. Thank you. Without further ado, we will hand over the time now to you, Trish. Trish, take it away.
Thank you. Thanks so much for inviting me. You guys can hear me all right. You can see the slide. Everything looks good. All right. All good? Okay. Yeah, so today I'm going to talk about how we can help our shelter dogs after they actually get adopted. And we have an interesting situation happening here on my side of the pond in that we have done such a great job with spaying and neutering that we have very few dogs in some areas of the country. So we're kind of moving a lot of sheltering from like used dog sales where we adopt out dogs that have come into us to supporting people more outside of the shelters. So I'm going to talk a little bit about supporting the dogs that we adopt out, but I think a lot of sheltering in the future is going to move beyond the shelter as we get better at making sure there are fewer stray dogs, fewer dogs who actually need homes. We can help dogs not even come into the shelter. So I'll talk a little bit about that because the two programs often work together and the same resources work for both. But we want them all to be just as happy as these two are on adoption day. So why should we support our adopters? Well, I don't know about you guys, but every time I've brought a dog home, I have had about 2 days of, oh my God, what have I done? And I'm pretty sure a lot of people have that. I'm a professional trainer, and if it's happening to me, can you imagine how it is going to feel to somebody who's never had a dog before? Going from no dogs to one dog is way harder. There's a lot of beeping happening. I don't know if there's a way to shut that off. Don't see anything on mine. I guess it'll just keep beeping. Yeah, so a lot of people feel overwhelmed. Going from no dogs to one dog is even harder than the last time I went from 3 dogs to 4. And I still had 2 days of, this is a lot. So sometimes the dogs we're bringing in from the shelter are also not used to living in homes. So we've got person not used to a dog not used to a home, and a lot of things can go sideways in that. So I don't know about you guys, but when my mom house trained our first dog, I saw some stuff that is not appropriate now, 50 years later. We do not rub dogs' noses in their messes to tell them that you don't poop in the house. But if I hadn't had a dog since my mom first house trained my dog, that's how I might think that you have to house train a dog. I won't understand that you feed them a treat when they go outside, you interrupt them. There's a lot more gentle ways than how we used to do things 50 years ago in Canada, where I'm from. The other thing is, if you catch these problems as soon as they start happening, we're having trouble with house training, you can fix that in a couple of days if people just know what to do. So we really want the dogs to stick in the homes of the people who fell in love with them and took them home, and a little bit of post-adoption support can go a long way. So at the time of adoption, most of us sit down with our adopters and we give them a lot of information. And I read somewhere that you understand, you retain 10% of what you hear. I would guess that if you've got a cute puppy in your lap, you retain even less than that. So this is my puppy Kenya, who I adopted in 2001 from the San Francisco SPCA, and I had to go through adoption counseling. They didn't care that I was a trainer. They were going to sit down and tell me everything I needed to know. And all I had running through my head in a stream. They did not put the puppy in my lap. That was smart of them, but through my head is going, puppy, 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 puppy. And I heard almost nothing of what they said. Fortunately, I'm a professional trainer. I didn't really need to hear it, but if that had been my first puppy, I wouldn't have had much help. They also gave me a package. Here's your adoption package. And usually we'll go through, like, here, you've got a puppy, here's your house training sheet, here's your chew training sheet. And they went through medical needs because she had just been spayed and she also had an injury on her paw. So they went through what to do with her medically as well. And that's typically what adoption counseling looks like. But just recognize that a lot of people won't hear any of it, or they might retain a small part of it. So it's important to send them home with something that they can look at afterwards, as well as your phone number, so they can get in contact with you. So we want it to be super easy. You want that phone number to be written in big letters across the front of the adoption package. If you need help, please call me, because after the dog has had accidents in the house for a month, they may be done with it. Their carpet might be ruined. They might just be like, take this dog back. Whereas if you talk to them on day one and you gave them some quick tips, they might not need to. It's also good to let your adopters know about any services you offer. And I'll go through some of the services that we offer over here. And if your shelter is not yet offering them, I encourage you to give your adopters as much help as they can. So that might include coming to public classes at your shelter, at a trainer's place. It might be consults via Zoom, or they bring the dog in for a consult. It might be a trainer going to their home. You might have continuing education webinars such as these ones. I'm sure you guys give your adopters access to this. And I'd like you to consider, now that everybody's got a video camera in their pocket, think about posting video tutorials. And I think a lot of people understand a lot better the training techniques if you show them a video of how to do it, rather than when the dog eliminates outside, give them a cookie, like show a video, like, here's how we interrupt, here's how we crate train. And I think that's more digestible, like little short videos. It's not for everybody. I have one client who's like, YouTube, I don't know how to use it, so I don't send her videos. But giving them the basic info, some troubleshooting, some general information on dogs. I really like the Kiko Pup YouTube channel. She has hundreds of videos. This is my channel. It's very small. I've got a little bit of stuff. I thought over the pandemic I would build a library of videos, but then I got too busy with other stuff. So I've got a few things. But Kiko Pup is a YouTube channel run by trainer Emily Larlam, who's just excellent and really nice, positive training methods. The videos are very understandable. So that might be something to add to your adoption package. Or give them links in the email. Send them a post-adoption email. And here's some links to channels. Here's some links to Ian Dunbar has a free puppy book on his serious puppy training website. And it's important to remember that not all owners learn things the same way. So I'm a nerd. I went to a lot of university. I'm pretty good at reading things and understanding. Some people don't. I have a friend who's dyslexic, and if you gave her something to read, she would get through the first paragraph and just she'd put it down. But she understands things better if you explain them to her by telling her. I think the best way is kinesthetic learning, where I show you something, I hand you the leash, and you do it as well. There are people who are just self-conscious, and I don't want to do it in front of you, and I might do it wrong. And I know people like that. So be flexible with how you're showing people. If you're teaching them a BMOD technique, this dog is leash reactive, here's what we're going to do. Offer them the chance to try it as well, but understand that some people are not going to do it in front of you because they're shy, and that's okay. So I like videos a lot though, because you're talking, you actually see it, then you can go practice it, then you can come back and watch the video again. I think adoption counseling and post-adoption support of the future is going to be more video oriented. So a sample for a dog who's super mouthy, like my little adolescent scruffy dog here, you might want to teach them how to play tug with rules. A lot of guys particularly will take the dog home and roughhouse with them and let them grab the toy and grab the arm and grab the hand and launch themselves and just work themselves into a big frenzy. And what I like to tell people who do that is, yeah, that's fine. You're teaching the dog to grab things without permission. You're teaching them not to let go of it. You're teaching them that hands are toys. Not exactly things you want to encourage, but if you look at police dogs, if you look at agility dogs, they're doing all that work for the opportunity to play tug with a toy, but they're not grabbing it out of their handler's pockets. There are rules around it. And if you teach tug with rules, you get a dog who waits for the cue to grab the toy. You have a dog who drops things on cue. Oh, I should say dog must do some obedience. Dog must do something in between bouts of tug. And if the teeth touch the hands at all, the game just ends. And if you do that, you end up encouraging all of these positive behaviors, and you still get to play tug with your dog. So this is one of the few videos I have on McMillan animal behavior. And this is a tug with rules demo. So this little guy is a dog who was terrified at the shelter. He couldn't even walk. They weren't sure he had legs when he came in, and they knew I was a Doberman person. They asked me to take him home and do some work with him. And I found him an awesome, awesome home. But when he came out of his shell, you kind of wanted to stuff him back in. He was really, really excitable, grabbing at things, really liked to tug hard. So here's a little video of a tug demo.
This is Flip. He's an 8-month-old Doberman. He really loves tug, and we're going to try to add some rules to it. The first thing I do is step on the leash so that he can't grab it. He needs to first wait until I give him permission. Ready? 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 Okay, get it. I move it away to get him to get it. Get that toy. You don't want to jam it into his face. You want him to come to the toy. Boy, no, you're very fierce. The next thing he needs to learn is how to drop it. I'm going to step on the leash. Stop pulling on it. Flipper. Drop. Cheese is exciting enough. Yay, cheese worked. Good boy. Flip, sit. Wait, we need to do some obedience before we play again. Wait. Wait. Okay, get it. Good boy. Yeah, get it. Oh, you're so good. What a good boy. So the dog loves tug this much. I'm not going to wind him up too much. Drop. I know, it's exciting. He came to me with the habit of running off with his toys. So we're just using the leash to avoid that. Sit. Good boy, wait. Ready? Ready? Okay, get it. Good boy, that was super good. That was super good. What a good boy. And I let him win it once in a while. That's fun for him.
Just a little tutorial on anything that you find yourself repeating over and over during adoption counseling, that you can shoot them an email a couple days later, maybe with some links. Here are some common issues that people have in their first 3 days. And here are actual videos on how to do it. So, and there's Kenya when she was 14 years old, just before she died. So that adoption counseling, even though I heard none of it, it worked out fine. I kept her for her whole life, and that's what we want. So here's another recently adopted dog who has made a mess out of the living room, and these are some of the things that adopters get super frustrated with, and maybe they'll reach for their adoption package and see if there's something in here on dogs who trash the house. Like, is this separation anxiety? Is this just destructive behavior? Maybe you've got a little video on how to deal with dogs. This was a dog who did not do well in a crate. He could bust out of crates. So it was a bit of a challenge. Okay, it's my dog. That's one of mine too. And it was a bit of a challenge when he was younger to reduce the destructiveness. So over here, the common times for follow-up calls are 3 days, 3 weeks, and 3 months. You might look through your adoption records and see when are common times that people are calling you with panicky questions about the dogs, common times that the dogs get returned, and those might be good intervals for you to do it. But this is a good place to start, because after 3 days, you've gotten to know the dog. They've probably done a few things you have questions about, just touching base. It may all be fine. The dog might have been perfectly house trained, perfectly chew trained, and they're loving it. 3 weeks, the dog's getting a little more settled in. The people are getting more used to having a dog, but they may have more questions. There may be some behaviors that the dog wasn't showing at 3 days that they're like, now I'm home. I'm going to show you a little more about you. And 3 months is kind of when the dog feels like they're home. And there are behaviors like territorial behavior, like, okay, now that I live here, nobody else can come in the house, that may pop up around the 3 month mark. So those are kind of arbitrary, but it's good to have several touches, not just it's the day after you adopt the dog. You have any questions? No, click, and they don't have any more contact with you. Let them know they're not alone, and we really want these adoptions to work out. So having a Zoom consult, having the dog come into the shelter for a consult, even going to the adopter's home, all of those are less trouble than bringing the dog back, having to readmit them, having the dog readjust to being in the shelter, and then looking for somebody, especially if they were returned for something like destroying the living room or leash reactivity, because now we've got a problem on top of it that we've got to work on. So those follow-up calls are really important. So I'll go through a few things that we often work with. There's Theodore again. Do not leave anything where he can get it. He's 8 years old and he's still very creative. So for house training, sometimes we will send people home with a crate, because that again is cheaper than readmitting the dog and the cost of care per day. Or loaning a crate, or loaning an X-Pen, or loaning a baby gate, just so that a little one like this has some confinement. They don't have the run of the whole place. A lot of people just sort of slam the dog in the crate and go to work for 8 hours, and the dog freaks out the whole time because they've never been crated before. And even in a weekend, you can teach a puppy to love being in a crate. This was a puppy who was in for training. You can see the crate door is open. And we did lots of run in the crate and lie down, run in the crate and lie down. She got so many cookies in that crate that if I walked near the crate, she would run in the crate and lie down. And that's the level of loving the confinement area that makes it easier to then leave for work. It's also important to tell people to give the dog a snack when they reward outside. They might think, well, they're supposed to go outside. I don't want to reward them for it. But I tell you, a few pieces of cheese is way cheaper than steam cleaning the carpet. And it's important to talk about puppy proofing the house and making sure that all of your fine chewables are up, all of the laundry is in closed containers, the garbage is under the sink. I had a child lock under my sink when I had one particularly smart little Aussie who would get in. And it's important to give them actual good options to chew. A lot of folks are like, well, just don't chew that, don't chew that, don't chew that. And they don't actually give the dog anything to chew. And you can, it doesn't have to be something expensive. My pit bull's favorite art medium is a cardboard box. If I put his Kong in a cardboard box when I leave, he will shred the box and he will eat the Kong. And if I leave him a nice little offering like that, it is much less likely that he will find something of mine to make art with. So, you know, even a plastic bottle, put a few kibbles in it and they can chase that around and eventually the kibbles will come out. It's, a lot of folks are worried if they give their dogs actual animal parts like rawhide, or I gave a client a dried duck's foot that I found at the pet store for her little dog because she wasn't interested in the plastic nylabone. I'm like, give her something made of animal. Of course, you got to make sure the dog's not going to just swallow the whole thing and get an impaction, but if you've been doing enrichment at your shelter, you will know what sort of chewables your dog likes. I met my pit bull at the shelter and I knew he liked cardboard then. And why I left him home with no cardboard the first few times, I don't know. I also like to give a little bit of advice on if the dog's going into a multiple dog home or a multiple pet home, that every animal should have their own place. I just fed my dogs before I hopped on with you, and the young one got fed in the crate and the old one got fed in the bathroom and the pit bull got fed on the porch. And there's a door in between all of them. So pit bull eats in 0.5 seconds. I don't want him harassing my 14-year-old dog. And the same thing with chewies. If you've got a high value chewy, you don't want to start a big dog fight over it. So coaching people to separate their animals when they're giving really good chewies, when they're feeding them, talking to them about putting food into toys. And that can be as simple as, you know, the plastic recycle bottle with some kibble in it, or there's lots of wonderful toy enrichment you can buy. And the other thing that I think puppies should go home with, like a container of urine neutralizing, like enzymatic cleaner, and a container of bitter apple, something that makes things taste bad. So if you've got a fringe on the rug that the dog's trying to eat, well, better to roll up that rug while the dog's a puppy. But if you can't do that, if it's the kitchen table legs, I recently did a home training with somebody whose kitchen table legs looked like they'd been chewed on by beavers because they had a puppy and they had never heard of bitter apple. I'm like, just spray it every day. It doesn't last forever. You have to put it on every day or a couple times a day. But if the table legs taste bad every time the puppy puts their mouth on, and if you give them good alternatives, then you won't have those problems. So here's my little dog, my new little dog who doesn't destroy things, but she always has something in her mouth.
Is that an alligator? Let me see. What you got? Girl.
So she's an easy one because she doesn't destroy the toys, and pretty much anything can be a toy to her. But some dogs are pickier about their toys. So a lot of shelter dogs, especially you guys are dealing with some Singapore specials who maybe haven't been in a home before, who are a little bit more fearful than Miss Alligator Carrier here. It's important to coach your adopters in not inviting the entire family over to meet the dog on day one, the entire extended family, to give them some coaching on playing hard to get. I am really good with fearful dogs because I don't need to be, come on here, I'm Auntie Trish, you love me. Like, that's terrifying to a dog who has lived on the streets and who maybe hasn't had great experiences with people. But if you teach people to get a little bit sideways to the dog, to not look directly at them, maybe throw a few pieces of cheese. And I don't touch a fearful dog until they are begging for it. If they are over and they're flipping my hand with their nose and they're crawling on me, that's when I'll give them a little scratch on the chest and then stop and see if they want more. But just teaching people how to associate the things the dog's worried about with good things in life are really important. And sometimes you just have to accept this is who the dog is. I've had fearful dogs who, go pet the pit bull. The foster dog is not interested in strangers, just ignore them. And that's okay. Not everybody wants a dog who's in everybody's face. I I use my other dogs as therapists for fearful dogs, for foster dogs and client dogs, because people lie to dogs a lot. I don't know if you've noticed it, but we'll call the dog over and then put him in the crate, and call the dog over and take him to the vet. And the vet goes in, he calls the dog over and gives him a shot. And they're like, you know, people are kind of untrustworthy. And obviously we want to associate these things with good things so the dog doesn't get afraid of coming over, but dogs don't lie to other dogs. And when I have a fearful dog over here and my dogs are like, new person, yay, you can see the fearful dog like, the dogs say this person's okay, and they're much more likely to listen to the dog. So this one, although she's a lovely little dog, I'm carrying around something in her mouth again, she's an escape risk. So these ones you may want to leave a harness on them if they're not going to chew it off. You may want to leave a martingale collar. This is a martingale collar that tightens a little bit around her neck if she tries to get out. And she's actually wearing a GPS collar. This is a whistle tracker. It's not a shock collar. I have to explain to all my clients, I'm not shocking my little dog. But she was good at getting under the fence on my farm, and that collar would send me a text anytime she was out of a designated area that I did on the GPS. And then I could track her with it with an app on my phone and go find her at the neighbor's place with the dog over there. You can also advise them to put an extra baby gate or an X-pen inside the door so that there's a bit of an airlock, at least for the beginning, if you're sending home a dog who might want to escape. Here's a fearful dog getting a little bit of dog therapy. So with your fearful dogs, sometimes it's less pressure for them to be the second dog in a home rather than you're the only dog and you're going to get all my love whether you want it or not. Maybe they go to a home where they're the dog's dog, and you've got the dog who's friendly and you've got the dog who's scared. So this little dog, she was scared of being out in public. There was some construction happening across from her home for a little while, and she decided, I can't go out the front door. The backyard's still okay, but her owner couldn't walk her in his neighborhood. So I brought my pit bull over, and she had been to my place. They were good buddies. And there they are in their neighborhood. And her tail is up, giving the owner proof that we are actually in the neighborhood. And a few walks with Theodore, and she realized, like, Theodore's not scared of the world. Maybe it's okay to go for walks in my neighborhood. So separation issues are something that come up a lot. Of people see the pictures of my dog chewing things up and think, oh, poor thing's got separation anxiety. So it's important that your people running the helpline or your trainers that you work with understand the difference between separation anxiety and separation fun. So this picture at the top is from a dog with actual separation anxiety. He was shut in a room. I think this was the bathroom. And this is the damage he did while his owner was gone for an hour. There was actually a mirror here that he pulled off the wall, and he cut his paws up. And all of the damage is where he last saw her leave. So that is an actual panic attack. That's clinical separation anxiety. Whereas here's a bathroom that my pit bull did some art in, but the door is open. I left out the front door. He was not locked in the bathroom. He just rampaged through the house and looked for cardboard to chew up and had a blast. And I have put videos on him, and he's not anxious. He's having fun when he's doing this. So looking at where the damage is, looking at whether they eat things, he'll pull things off the counter and spread open a loaf of bread and eat that. That's not a dog who's having a panic attack. And a lot of these dogs will pee or poop as soon as the person leaves. So you go out to the car, you forget something, you come back in, and there's already pee and poop in the house. And that is from panic. That is not spite. That is a dog who is absolutely terrified of being alone. So if this damage is all over the house and things are being unstuffed and things are being eaten, maybe separation fun, that requires different things. That requires, with my dog who doesn't do well in crates and can bust out of it, it required really puppy proofing well. Actually, I still do. He's 8 years old, and leaving him an offering. Here's something you can destroy. And the other key to separation anxiety is you'll have that constant vocalization, and it's a very specific, I lived in the basement apartment underneath someone with a dog with separation anxiety, and it was the same 3 barks repeated for hours in the same tempo. And she eventually got the dog some medication and some help, but it took some convincing, and she wasn't the one who had to listen to it. So if it is actually separation anxiety, you might want to, a lot of these dogs, it's just crate issues. I had one puppy who, if I left him loose in the bedroom, he'd sleep on the bed. But if I put him in a crate, he would panic and shred things and hurt his paws and hurt his teeth. It was just claustrophobia. So with a lot of dogs, you got to separate. Do they just hate being confined? And often just giving them a puppy-proof area and doing short departures. If it's a panic attack, like my friend's dog had trashed the bathroom, she put that dog on medication, and you may need to make sure that you are never leaving the dog alone while you work through this. And that's a hard thing. I read somewhere that about 15% of dogs in this country have actual separation anxiety, and I don't think it's necessarily from being left in a shelter. I think they get put in the shelter because it's very hard to live with. But if you know the dog has this issue, there are certified separation anxiety trainers who will work all over the world by Zoom. There are resources out there, and it may be worth sending the dog home with a package with a separation anxiety trainer. So resource guarding is a very normal thing. Dog-to-dog resource guarding is something that I tend to just manage with food and really talk to adopters, because I've met people who've always fed their dogs one bowl here, and then there hasn't been a problem. But I've watched those dogs eat, and one of them's kind of eating fast and trying to make sure the other one doesn't get it. So teaching people to just manage it between dogs, but towards people, you can counter condition it. Like, it's hard to get a dog to walk up to the other dog and throw a piece of chicken in their food bowl. But with people, if the dog's hunkering over the food bowl, they can walk up, throw a piece of chicken, walk away, walk up, throw a piece of chicken, until the dog's going, hey, chicken person, come on over, give me some dessert. The dogs may be guarding space or owners. That's a little more complicated. That can involve teaching the dog to go to a place. That can involve having people approach the owners and throw chicken. There's lots of different ways to work with that kind of guarding, but it's good to make sure that your phone people know what to talk to people about. A lot of dogs get to go for walks. I approve of walks. I think it's a great thing. I live out in the country where a lot of people just have a yard and let the dog out in the yard. And here's my 4 dogs out in the forest, and we walk on the trails off leash because we're allowed to do that if the dog's under control. But when we get close to the car and we're back on the road, I put them on a leash. And here we have 4 dogs. Nobody's on a head halter or front attach or choke collar or any special walking equipment. And look at all these loose leashes, because this is important to me. I do not consider my dogs trained until I can walk all 4 of them together with nobody dragging me. Those dogs outweigh me. If they wanted to pull me down, they could. So I really value leash manners. This is often something that's hard to teach in a shelter. The dogs are stressed, they want to get out. People handle them differently. It would be great if everybody handled them the same and taught leash manners in the shelter. I personally like using a bit longer leash if you've got a nature area like this and your dog can't be off leash, and let them sniff and let them stop. But in order to get this kind of behavior, obviously I'm not being super interesting there. I got my bait bag on. If they were really awesome, I would give them a cookie. But I did a lot of work with every one of these dogs separately to get this behavior. So I do a lot of rewarding for position, a lot of practice when we're not in the forest with 3 other dogs, and you can work up to having dogs who walk nicely. So here's a little bit of the beginning of leash manners. This puppy has never been walked on a leash, so I've got her on a harness. I think this harness is attached at the back. I usually do that with puppies. Sometimes I'll use a front attach if the puppy's already learned to pull. I've already got some distractions here. You don't have to have chickens, but here's a little bit of teaching the dog to love being on the left side. I'm feeding her with my left hand, and I'm feeding her with my hand pointed backwards so that she doesn't have to come around to the front of my hand to get the cookie. The cookie's right where she is.
was really crooked. Try again. I know, it's hard with chickens everywhere. Sit.
This is a Bouvier. She's going to be an 80-pound dog, so brainwashing her while she's this size is important.
Good, that's it. Good girl. Good, we'll take that. Good girl. We'll take that. Good girl. Let's go. Right here. Good.
So I'm being really, really generous. I'm teaching her that sitting on my left side is a place where you get a whole lot of cheese, so she'll want to sit when I stop. And I'm super, super generous. And that's just her dinner. She's got to eat all those kibbles for breakfast anyway, so might as well feed them in training. That's a really important thing. If you're a lazy trainer like me, just feed your dogs or train your dogs at feeding time with their kibble, and you don't have to set aside hours of the day to train. Just 5 minutes, they eat their food and they are better after every meal. So leash reactivity is a super important thing, and I could talk for an hour about that alone. I'm sure you've had other people talk about leash reactivity in this series. I will give you one resource that you can give away for free as a trainer if you go to the Instinct Dog Training online school, and the link is here. There is a free course on working with dogs who lunge and bark at other dogs or lunge and bark at people. And it's video, it's self-guided. You can sit down and watch a video anytime. You can rewatch the videos, and it shows you a bunch of techniques. So it's really important. Like, I taught my first dog to yell at other dogs on leash by going, "You be nice," and tightening up the leash. And she's like, "Oh, that's my cue to yell at things. You're upset, and now I'm being strangled." So I have learned to be happy when I see another dog. "Oh, look, there's a dog. Look at it, makes cheese happen." I always carried 2 values of treats. I might have the kibble for that puppy I was training, but I'll also have a piece of string cheese or some chicken in there in a baggie. And if she does something brilliant, I will switch over. Or if we run into bigger distractions, I'll switch over to better food. You can just manage the interactions. You can cross the street. You can get a car between you and the dog. You can do a U-turn. You can teach the dog that whenever you look at the dog, I say yes and you get a cookie over here. There's lots of things that you can do. And some shelters offer actual classes for leash reactive dogs where we all show up in a park and we keep enough distance and we use one another to teach the dogs not to yell at other dogs and teach all of these techniques in a group. It's a bit of mayhem. I have been to a few of these. I have taught a few of these, but it can work because you've always got other dogs. So I really recommend having a behavior helpline of some kind, whether it's volunteers calling people back, whether your trainers call people right after they have adopted, whether you do a Zoom call with people. You can do a lot with volunteers just with scripts. So if the dog's peeing in the house, here's what we do. That's something that the volunteer can talk them through, even if they're not a trainer. You might have enough behavior staff to do your own calls. Definitely, when I was at the ASPCA shelter, I would do the calls with the complicated dogs, because the dogs who had problems beyond house training and shoe training that might need a little more in-depth. And make sure people know about the service. Have it in your adoption package, send an email. And you can also use these same scripts to make sure, like intake diversion is making sure, or allowing dogs to stay in the homes that they're already in. So talking to people who have dogs who are thinking, "I can't deal with this, I'm gonna give up the dog." The same volunteers or training staff can help keep dogs in their home, which is just as good. So here's a pit bull being adopted into a home with 2 cats. Maybe the adopter needed some help doing that integration. So one thing that is offered here in Asheville is they will offer a $200 training voucher. If you are going home with a dog and we know that you're going to need some help. He's from a dog fighting bus. They're bred for high prey drive. You've got cats. Maybe you're going to need a little help doing the integration. You could have a Zoom consult with a trainer, or you can have a trainer come into your home. And sometimes having 1 or 2 in-person visits can help the dog not come back. So I had a house training case that Asheville Humane sent a voucher to the owner. She was living in public housing. She was on disability. She did not have a whole lot of disposable income. And she had a little dog who was a year old, and she had peed outside, I think once or twice in that year, and all the rest had been in her bedroom. And she had called Asheville Humane, like, would you like a barky little dog who doesn't really like strangers? And they said, let's talk to Trish. And so I went to her house, and she didn't know what a crate was. She hadn't thought about confinement. She hadn't thought about like making the dog love the crate. She had a learning disability, so I had to like write out a house training chart and show her how to let's start marking down where the dog pees and poops and what time, so that we can figure out a schedule. And I went back to the shelter and got her a crate and some chewies and came back to the house with a way to confine the dog. And she took her out of the crate first thing in the morning, took her outside and kept her there until she peed. And within a few weeks, that dog was house trained. And I still get a text from her. This was years ago. I still get a text from her once in a while, because that dog had been left to her, but she got it with her partner, and her partner had passed away. And this was all she had left to remember them by. And there was a lot of stuff going on there that I hadn't known about, but because the dog was destroying the flooring in the house, she might lose her housing, and she had thought about giving this dog up. And it was super simple to fix. And honestly, those are some of the most satisfying training gigs I get, is where you get to keep a dog with their owner. So another thing that a lot of the local shelters are doing is sort of pop-up training tents. So this is my friend Elliot. He's a local trainer, and he is at the training booth, which is just a tent at a vaccine clinic. And I was working the line in that vaccine clinic. So I was walking the line and saying, okay, this dog's super barky. Let's put your dog back in the car, and you keep your place in line, and you run and get your dog when it's time to go in. If I saw a dog who could use some walking equipment or could use some help, I'm like, go on over to see Elliot when you're done with your vaccines, and he'll talk to you about house training your new puppy. And look, she's got a Kong, she's got a handout, she is all ready to go. And we tend to do these clinics in areas where there is a lot of need, where there's people who don't have a lot of disposable income. And a lot of these dogs are dogs that have been adopted into these homes, as well as making sure dogs stay in their homes. So we tend to have training help, vaccines, free food, flea control. And if the dog requires in-home help, they can also offer training vouchers for somebody to follow up in home. So if you prevent the dog from coming back to the shelter or from coming into the shelter in the first place, then you don't need this post-adoption support. And I think keeping the animal with a family who already loves them, like that little dog that I did the house training stuff with, she was not going to be easy to adopt. She was smaller, but she barked at me the whole time I was there. Every time I visited her, we eventually became a little closer, but I know she wouldn't have done well in a shelter. She had only lived in this house with this one woman. So these types of programs are becoming way more popular in North America. We also like to make appointments for intakes so that we have time to sit down with people and talk to them, like, is there anything we can do to help you keep the dog? If we're taking them in, can we find out everything you know about them so we can make a good placement? And when I was putting this presentation together, I just realized that these are all the same things that we use for people after they've adopted. So you can merge the programs really easily. So what about training classes? When I started at the ASPCA, they did not have classes, and they had a lovely training room. That location had had shelters since the 1930s when Blanche Saunders was there. And it was a shame that there were not classes. And they said, well, we are not here to support the public, and there's other people doing classes, and it's Manhattan and people have money. And so I started doing drop-in classes, and it was only for adopters, and that way we were supporting our mission. And you may want to have a course of classes. So our next puppy class starts on Wednesday night, and it goes for 4 weeks or 6 weeks. I like the drop-in classes. It is mayhem. It's a lot harder for people to manage, because I have somebody who's been to 4 classes, somebody who's been to 1 class, somebody who's never been to a class, all in the same room and trying to impart the information. But I kind of like mayhem. I've been training a long time. I did not find that impossible. Some of my newer trainers were like, please don't make me do drop-in class. But the cool thing is the people who were there for the first night would see somebody who'd been there 4 times, and they would see the dog sitting and lying down and doing all the things. And I could give them a more challenging level of the exercise if they'd been to a few classes than the person who's there for the first night. So we had one night that was puppies and one night that was adult dogs. And these can be really helpful. And I love group classes because the dog learns to listen with other dogs and other people around. It's a little bit of throwing them in the deep end of the pool, but boy, oh boy, by the time they've been to 4 or 5 classes, the dog could work with, and with dropping classes, it's different dogs every time. So they're really learning to work with distractions. And in Manhattan, you've got to be able to be around other dogs. It was very high density population. And they're also the least expensive for you guys to put on. So this is one of the local training schools. That's my new little dog. I'm a trainer. I take my dogs to classes. Why? Because there's distractions. And they have these nice little ring gates. So if she was a barky dog, they could put a sheet. They can make her a little cocoon, and they could have sheets over just the sides or all the way around or just the front. And it can be a little bit of mayhem, but these dividers really can make it a lot easier. And then people sort of have their place. So here's your dog bed that you're going to teach your dog to lie on. Here's a chair for you to sit on if you can't stand through the whole class. Here's a little clip to the wall if you don't want to hold your dog's leash. And we'll put up dividers if your dog's barky. And these guys do really well at this training center. I send people there all the time. So the drop-in levels classes, I would do just sort of the same lessons on rotation. So we do sit down, stay, heel, come when you're called. And it doesn't really matter what order, they're not sort of building on each other. But you can also add in more advanced classes. I had people who would come to tons of drop-in classes and like, really, we should have a little beginner obedience class or a tricks class or beginner agility class for you guys to continue your training. So it's up to you how many classes. I did not get the nod for more classes, but it's really a lot of fun just to teach people to do little obstacles with their dogs, and it increases the bond. And I've never had anybody complain, oh, my dog, I like my dog, but they're too well trained. So for puppy classes, we often do the orientation with no puppies in the class. If it's like a 4-week or a 6-week segment, we talk about house training, we talk about chew training, socialization periods, how to do it properly, how to teach the dog to love being handled, touch their ears, open their mouth and give them a cookie pill. Sit down, stay, walk on a leash, and come are your building blocks of obedience. And we do some leash work, walking around the class, maybe go out in the parking lot or go out in the field and work on leash work where you've got a little more space. I always do some preventative work. Your dog's eating, throw a piece of cheese in their bowl. And I like letting the puppies play and talking to people about body language and what good play looks like and when to interrupt. In our adolescent adult class, we would also talk about body language and, you called your dog and then you petted them and he went like this. That was not actually a reward. He's not enjoying being whacked on the head. And we'll talk about husbandry as well, how to give them pills, how to clean their ears, how to make them like all of that. You still need house training and chew training with adult dogs often, your obedience, leash work. So it is not that different. I didn't usually do group play in the adult class because the population of dogs we had didn't all love it. But I'd also like to sort of take the stigma out of returns. I was thinking about volunteering at a shelter in one city I lived in, and I walked into the shelter and I was just sitting in the waiting room and a woman brought a cat back in the cat carrier and was just like, I'm really sorry, my son's really allergic to this cat, I've got to give it back. And the woman behind the counter was so rude to her. She said some mean things, snatched the cat and stomped off into the back. And that poor woman, like, is she going to tell her friends, you should go to this shelter and adopt an animal? It's not all animals fit into all households. It's kind of an arranged marriage. You're saying you're meeting a dog you've got, can you drink any louder? you got to look into those eyes on day one and decide, am I going to live with you for the rest of your life? And, not all marriages work out. I'm not married anymore. I went into that with my eyes open. It took more than one day to get to know him, and it didn't work out. And that's okay. We've both moved on to better things. And the same thing can happen with animals. We really want the best fit between the house and the dog. And I've brought home, I have my connections with the shelter. I brought home that little Doberman that I did the tug with, and there was part of me that was like, oh, maybe I'll keep him. But every single one of my dogs said, when's he leaving? He's so annoying. Please get him out of here. They just hated him. They all hated him. Because I hadn't adopted him. I just brought him home for some training. I really personally liked him. No, but yeah, I know you didn't like him either. I let him go on to another home. So I have that privilege because I know the shelter people, but if I had adopted him and brought him home and every one of my dogs had said, please, can he go? And I'd brought him back and been treated badly, like it's not cool. It's just not cool. Be nice to people if they return. And I would always try to turn it into an exchange. Like, okay, this little puppy went home and ate your house. You work 8 hours a day. I get it. That's not fun. I've had my house eaten. What about this 3-year-old dog? I know he's been in a home. He went out on foster last week. He did not pee in the house. He did not chew anything. Maybe this is the right dog. Not the right dog right now. Fine. If you want to come back, I'll help you find a dog who doesn't do this. And that person leaves the shelter and they're like, that trainer was so nice. And it doesn't do any good to be mean to people if they bring dogs back. Not every dog fits into every home. So that's my final words for you in this webinar. That's me and my little pit bull, and here's where to find me. You are a talker today. So that's my website. You can find me on Facebook, McMillan Animal Behavior. I'm always putting training tips up there. If you'd like to follow my naughty dog and his artwork, he has a Facebook page with more friends than me, Pibbling with Theodore. On Instagram, I'm pibbling as well. That's mostly just my dog doing silly things. And I started TikTok as a pandemic entertainment, and I am Daldoby on that. And it is there's not a lot of training on that either. It's mostly just fun videos from the farm and a lot of chickens for some reason. Chickens have kind of taken over my TikTok. So that's all I've got for you guys. We can move on to the question and answer part.
Thank you so much, Trish, for the very interesting talk today. And post-adoption support really does seem to be very important in helping rescue dogs stay in their homes and have the best life possible. We'll now open the floor to the Q&A, and thank you to everyone who has sent in questions. We apologize in advance that due to the shortage of time, we might not be able to get through all of them. Let's move to the first question. Do you agree that some breeds are predisposed to having certain characteristics? For example, hunting breeds may have a high prey drive or tendency to go at the ankles that may be deemed aggressive, and thus making them a bite risk around other animals or even young children?
Well, I a pit bull from a dogfighting bust, so I am a big believer in all dogs are individuals. It's become very popular on my side of the pond to be like, this is a hunting dog, he needs hunting enrichment and he will do hunting things. But there's actually more variation between individuals of a specific breed than there are between breeds themselves. So I have met hunting dogs who, like here, a lot of the hunting dogs who end up in shelters, the hunting hounds, they don't hunt at all. That's why they're in the shelter. They got lost in the forest. Somebody found them and brought them here. And it's like, I suck at finding rabbits. Can I please sleep on your couch? My fighting dog, he doesn't fight. You saw him with the cats. He loves the cats. He loves the chickens. He sucks at his original job. That doesn't mean there aren't breed-specific traits. It doesn't mean that the other dogs we adopted from that fighting bust, we let people know that they may be picky about their friends. The ones who actually wanted to kill other dogs, we euthanize. The ASPCA does not send out dogs who are likely to kill other dogs, but I would never say, well, he's a pit bull, he can't go to a home with kids, or that's a border collie, they're going to herd the kids for sure, we're not going to let them go. I would get to know the dog as an individual. And if we know at the shelter, we've done playgroup, we've had him out in public and he sees something fast moving, he's going to go for the heels, maybe he doesn't go to the home with 6 children who run around all the time. But treat the dogs as individuals and place them accordingly, and don't make assumptions, because especially in shelter world where we're not getting like purebred, most of the dogs in our shelters here are not purebreds. And okay, that little scruffy dog, I thought she was a terrier when I got her. I thought, I'll take her home. I don't think I'm going to keep her. I think she's going to kill my chickens because she's clearly a Jack Russell mix and they've got that high prey drive. And there I am typecasting. She does not care about the chickens. She can carry an egg in her mouth. She's so gentle. I did her DNA and she is golden retriever, poodle, pit bull, and chihuahua. There is no terrier in her other than pit bull. And she has no terrier traits. So if I was placing her from the shelter, I'm like, terrier mix, be careful. You know, I'm guilty of typecasting because I know my breeds, but treat them as individuals and place them accordingly.
Yep. Thank you for that. The next question is, do you think it's fair if these dogs are then euthanized due to negligence, carelessness, or failure to manage and train the dog on the owner's part? How do you strike a balance between euthanasia for safety reasons versus giving the dog a chance in a different environment with different handlers?
Yeah, well, most dogs do fine no matter where we send them. They did a study over here, and 95% of dogs in the US get no professional training whatsoever. And dogs are really good at figuring us out and fitting into whatever weird home life we have. So most dogs get no training and do fine anyways. So I think in shelter world, we tend to blame the owner. And what I see we have a lot of bully breeds over here who have a tendency to become dog aggressive as they get older. So they hit social maturity between 18 months and 3 years. They start biting the neighbor's dogs. The owner brings them back, and then the shelter person's like, well, you didn't socialize them. It's your fault. And I would say if the dog has a good temperament to start with, it's unlikely for that to happen. Theodore, despite being from hardcore dog aggression genetics, did not get any of that. That's not because I'm a good trainer. That's because I chose well. So I think we need to offer lots of training support, but also be less judgy. The dogs who end up euthanized for behavior are dogs who would have not done well in any home. I had a dog that I raised from 3 weeks. He was in my house at birth, and by 3 weeks of age, he was growling at me. And by 18 months, I had euthanized him after many, many, many bites. And he went to puppy class. He got socialized. And you know, if it can happen to me, it can happen to anybody. So I think offer lots of support. Like, let's try to get them the training. But I think a lot of the dogs who are so behaviorally challenged, they need to be euthanized. I think a lot of that is their wiring, not necessarily the owner.
Yep. Okay, the next question is, how long do you think is too long for a dog to remain in a shelter if it cannot be placed in a foster or permanent home?
Well, what we aim for as best practices on my side of the pond is 2 weeks. I know you guys have a more special population of dogs that might take a little longer to socialize towards humans. And I do think we need to have some urgency around getting dogs out of shelters. Many dogs decline the longer they're in shelters. So rather than saving them, we're actually making them worse. So I think prioritizing getting them out. One thing we've recognized during COVID over here, I don't know how it's gone in Singapore, is the shelters got emptied as soon as lockdown happened. Everybody went to the shelter and was like, I'm going home with an animal. And we found that so many of the dogs that were doing poorly in the shelter, once they got into a home, did a lot better. So I think, and now that we've got a whole cohort of people who have foster dogs or have brought dogs in from shelters and are hopefully more likely to do that again. As I keep saying, I think sheltering is going to move outside of the shelter. I think foster care, I think in-home support, I think getting landlords to allow pets in the first place. I think a lot of that kind of advocacy is going to replace just used dog sales in the future.
Yep. On that same note, how do you deal with aggression issues post-adoption? Have you ever had to convince an owner to return a dog due to safety or welfare issues?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, especially, you know, if there's kids involved, if there's other animals who are getting hurt. Sometimes it is way better for the dog to come back to the shelter not everybody will do that, and I don't have power over that, but I'm pretty convincing. And if it's, you know, if it's the herding dog nipping at the heels, and we did not know that when the dog was with us, that's a dog who can be placed in a home with not small children running around and be fine. So I will try to convince them, like, we've got a nice Labrador here who likes sleeping on the couch. Maybe that would be a better match, but I can't force people to bring the dog back. But yeah,
Yep.
sometimes it's really appropriate, and being open and welcoming and nice to them when they do is important.
The next question is on trainers. You mentioned in your slides earlier that about certified trainers. Can you explain to us in Singapore about trainer certification, and what kind of certifications would you recommend for trainers that would like to work with shelter animals?
Yeah, so for when they were starting the voucher programs here, there was concern that people would go to trainers who are going to slap a shock collar on the dog or a metal collar and yank them and hurt them. I mean, the dog's already been through a shelter. Like, let's not add some harsh training methods on top. So what was agreed was that they were only going to refer. You could only use the voucher with a certified trainer. So the most common certification over here is CPDT, which you have to know about learning theory, you have to know about husbandry, you have to know about teaching humans. So there's many different areas. We got mine in 2006. I'm trying to remember what was on the exam, but there are various levels of certification. And if you're going to offer vouchers, I don't know what certifications are popular in Singapore, but that is one way to help sort of assure people that they're going to a trainer who is at least up to date on humane methods, because all of the certifications I have to take continuing education units. I have to stay up to date with the new things that are happening. And I think that's a good, I mean, we should do that anyways, but I think that's a good way to sort of separate the good trainers from the trainers who might be harmful.
Yep. I'm mindful that it's already 9. So one last question. Do you have any tips on how to screen for suitable adopters well? Sometimes people complain about shelters having onerous or unreasonable screening processes and end up having to buy a puppy from a pet shop instead. How can we make the process easier, but at the same time ensure that the dog is going to a good home?
Oh boy, that could be a whole talk on itself. Bring me back for that. I will give you a resource for that. I think you should go to HSUS and look up the Adopters Welcome Program. They have a screening form in there. They call it a survey. It's not like an application where where it's really, really, really hard to get an animal. It's a problem over here too. It's a little bit worse with rescue groups than with shelters, but some shelters. I have a brother-in-law who has adopted 8 children. And he tried to get a dachshund from a dachshund rescue, and he said it is literally harder. Like, he quit after page 3 of the 6-page application. He said it is literally harder to adopt a dachshund in his state than it is to adopt a child. So I don't think it should be like that. I think we are giving up a lot of good homes. I personally cannot adopt a Doberman rescue from any Doberman rescue within 3 states. And I'm a professional trainer. I live on a farm. My fencing is 4 feet tall. I do not have a lock on my gate. I have a doggy door. The dogs can come and go to the fenced yard. All of those are reasons that I could not have a Doberman from any of the Doberman rescues around here. So I don't know where I'll get my next Doberman from. Maybe the one in Illinois who thinks I'm okay even. Oh, I also let them off leash in the forest, which is something that a lot of the rescues won't allow me to do. So I could go in and lie. But if we start our relationship on a basis of lies, am I going to come back to you for help if I need it? So I could talk about that all day. But Adopters Welcome is a great program. It's a brochure. They've got a application form that's less painful than what my poor brother-in-law had to go through.
Okay, thank you so much. We'll probably share the resource with everyone after the talk. And thank you so much, Trish, and everyone who has submitted a question. We've come to the end of our webinar on providing post-adoption support for shelter dogs, and we hope that you managed to gain some insights into the rehoming of shelter dogs in the best way possible. Head over to our Facebook page, Animal Buzz SG, for more educational information on animal ethology, and like the page for regular content. If you did not manage to catch yesterday and today's session, you can view it live by visiting the NParks SG YouTube page or scanning and saving the QR code below. Thank you so much, and I hope everyone has enjoyed our webinars and have a good night. Thank you so much, Trish, as well. Good night, everybody.
For inviting me. Bye-bye.
Trish, if you don't mind, just